Shout out to G-Man Boxing.
Alright people, review of the week time. Now, obviously first things first, I didn't cover any of the fights the weekend. Obviously, as you know, I was away. I'm only back in the last day and we're only getting to record this now because I've been feeling a bit fragile all day today. So, we'll talk about fight camp. We'll talk about the fights. I didn't see all the fights. Alright, there's only one I missed. I'll talk about what I think maybe could be improved, but I'll also talk about the improvements that the zone have made. Obviously, there's other news that's come about in the world of boxing, over the last few days, over the weekend, etc., etc. Even today, because I'm doing this late enough in the evening, I'm just going to get this up today as well. Hopefully before midnight. And yeah, we'll just do what we do always with these. Now, fight camp. Personally, the zone for me, certainly over the last few months, the quality of their broadcasting has come on night and day. Before we get into the fights, I just want to talk about the broadcasting as a whole. The broadcasting for the zone, the camera work, every kind of thing about it has come on night and day. Cast your minds back to 2018 when they started. They had that really, really ugly looking ring because they kind of had like a white kind of, it was almost greyish, and it just didn't, everything about the zone, you could tell they had a lot of growing pains. They've improved a lot, from the production quality. I think that there is some growing pains with the team. I'm not necessarily criticising them. I just think they need to bring more analysts in. Now, I can imagine they will do that. I watched the Cullen Yieldrum fight. Right, I didn't see Sandy Ryan's fight. But when I was watching that, and I was watching the after stuff, and I'll touch on that fight now in a wee bit, the general consensus that I was getting, when I was checking Twitter, was that people didn't not like Maya Jama. They didn't say that, but they said that her and Bellew was just, it didn't work. You'd kind of Bellew there who was a bit dull. You had Maya Jama who was asking the questions, and to me, they needed a bigger team. With Sky, when you look at Sky, they have Johnny Nelson, they'd have, I think, Carl Froch, they might have Magic Macklin or sometimes Darren Park, but there'd be a couple of extra ones there. It was just Bellew. Now, Bellew annoys me for several different reasons, right? But one reason specifically is that he actually could be a good analyst if he could just be biased. Now, he was fine on this one. Yeah, he's not the most endearing personality. He really is kind of like a McDonald's hamburger plain with no sauce. Do you know what sort of way? That's kind of Bellew in a nutshell. So there was no real they didn't click as far as I was concerned. Now, if they wanted to bring people in, whether it be, personally, I would have liked to have seen Carl Frampton on there. I think whether it was Carl Frampton and Maya Jama or whether it was Carl Frampton and Tony Bellew or someone like that, I think that could have been good because you could have had a few back and forths there. Carl Frampton is a very good boxing brain. He's a good speaker. I know his accent is strong, and believe me, I know the Belfast accent quite well. It can be hard to, even for me, it can be hard to understand them sometimes. Frampton, I don't think is that bad. So it would have been nice to see him there. Paulie Malignaggi would have been brilliant. I think that in future, I don't have an issue with Maya Jama at all, but I think they need more than just Bellew there. I think there needs to be a team of three. They're outdoors. There shouldn't be any issue with having some extra ones there. I know at the minute it's just Andy Lee and Bellew, and Andy Lee was on commentary, and Andy Lee did a great job on commentary. One thing about Andy Lee, I do wonder how he scores fights, because one thing about Andy Lee, now I like Andy Lee, I think he's a great commentator, I think he's a very good speaker, I think he's an excellent boxing analyst. He definitely has his own way of scoring fights, because it's been over the years when he's commentated on other cards or for other companies, other networks, he's done his scorecards, and I've always looked at for example, Cambosa Selby. I thought Cambosa's won that fight very clearly. Andy Lee had Selby winning that fight. So I think Andy Lee has certain styles he likes, and I think that kind of when he's going into scoring criteria, he does that as well. He kind of looks at what he likes, and he tends to we tend to have scorecards miles apart. If I'm watching a fight and scoring it or he's scoring it, we tend to be kind of all over the shop in that. But Andy Lee did a good job. Obviously big up to Ade. I was actually on TalkSport with him today, so big up to him. He was doing his thing as well. It was Laura Woods as well. I think that this team, if there are people making minor critiques, saying there needs to be more than Bellew and Maya Jama, that's fine. But if you're saying like, oh, it's crap after one show, I think that's a bit harsh. I think like it's a brand new team. It needs there's obviously going to be some growing pains there. So little changes I would bring in. They're only minor. Like I would just add a few more, pundits to it. I don't know if that's an option. I don't know whether money's an issue or whatever. Maybe a few more pundits, speaking there. Nothing too crazy. I just think that Bellew and Jama on their own, the general consensus, but even because I couldn't listen to it when I was listening to it, was in a bar, and I couldn't hear. But the general consensus was they didn't like it, or people said it just didn't click. And when I went back and listened to it, yeah, there wasn't much to them. So they could maybe add to that. That might be something they might want to look at. Not that they'll watch my video, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. I've always said that, like, one thing I loved about HBO was they had Harold Letterman scoring. You're never going to get someone as good as Harold Letterman in terms of just that, the okay gym, and Letterman was a decent scorer. But I'd like someone to get someone like that in, like just a proper judge, not a former fighter, because sometimes you'll have with a judge, for the most part, a lot of their scorecards can be quite accurate. Sometimes you'll get judges who are just, maybe drinking on the job and they come out with mad scorecards. But for the most part, someone like Letterman, they had good ones. Maybe something like that. That's my critique about the show in itself. Let's get to the fights. Cullen Yieldrum. Now, this was a weird one. Obviously, Yieldrum had a fight deal with DAZN following on from the Canelo fight, so they had to get him out on some shows. It's just a strange one, isn't it, though, that you go from facing Canelo Alvarez to fighting Jack Cullen in Eddie Hearn's back garden and getting soundly beaten. I mean, Jack Cullen, I picked Yieldrum to win this fight because I'd seen Jack Cullen at domestic level, and that's really where I thought Jack Cullen would stay, because he just never really showed me anything more. Yieldrum, you would say that he is a European level fighter. I mean, he had that he had that technical decision loss to Durrell, which a lot of people felt was controversial. It's one of the reasons why he was made mandatory. He has majority decision win over Lenga Mock, who is as old as dirt at this stage. So, there's not really any major depth on his resume. Obviously, he was battered by Canelo, battered by Eubank Jr. He was a sparring partner for James DeGale a couple of years ago when James DeGale was still IBF champion at 168. So, in hindsight, he's not really done much. But you still would have thought he would have been just about a level above Jack Cullen. But Jack Cullen, to his credit, did an excellent job, thoroughly outworked Davin Yieldrum, had a little scare in the 8th round, but other than that, he really won this fight quite comfortably, to be honest with you. You could give Yieldrum maybe 2 rounds in there, to be honest with you. He really didn't do much. So Jack Cullen, full credit to him. I mean, you would say now maybe he can try and have a go at European level, or we'll see what Eddie Hearn wants to do with him. I get the impression with Eddie Hearn that he likes Jack Cullen seems to bring a lot of fans, which is one of the reasons why Eddie Hearn has him on these cards. If you think about it, this Felix Cash beat Jack Cullen, beat him soundly, but Eddie Hearn got him onto BT. Eddie Hearn hadn't done much with Felix Cash up until that point, so you get the impression that it shouldn't be this way. But if you're a big ticket seller, you're big with the fans, irrelevant of your level of ability. It's not me having a knock at Jack Cullen, by the way, but a lot of them do tend to get up higher on the card than, say, someone who is genuinely more talented. Shouldn't be that way, but it is in a lot of cases. Nevertheless, Jack Cullen moves on. Yieldrum, I believe, has one more fight with DAZN. So if you want because it gets kind of like Wilderness, what would you do with him? I'd be getting Lerone Richards in there, personally, because that's a great measuring stick to see where you're at. Richards, some people say he's above British level. Well, I would say Yieldrum is slightly above British level, so if you want to get your feet wet in there, stick him in with Yieldrum. Yieldrum, obviously, he's been stopped twice. Cullen couldn't stop him, but there was moments there where he had Yieldrum rocked a bit. People say that Richards doesn't punch. Well, if he's able to make a dent in Yieldrum, although Yieldrum probably doesn't have a granite chin, but if he buzzes him, there's a bit of power there. I'd say he has enough power anyway, so that might be an option. Obviously, Anthony Fowler fought on this card. Very good performance from Anthony Fowler, looking much improved under Shane McGuigan. The Fowler who was under Dave Caldwell. And Dave Caldwell's a decent trainer, don't get me wrong, but I think that Dave Caldwell, you see, when Dave Caldwell was working with Anthony Fowler, this is not, I hope, again, I always say it, but Dave Coldwell didn't come across as a trainer for Fowler. He came more across as a manager for Fowler. I don't know if he had a deal where he was managing Fowler, because Dave Coldwell, remember, has done promotion for fighters. And whenever you wouldn't see any improvements with Fowler, but when you hear Dave Coldwell speak, he sounded like a promoter for Anthony Fowler. You know, whenever they'd mentioned, even if Fowler wasn't even on the card, if they mentioned 154, Fowler's this, Fowler's that, it's like, shut up, he's not even mentioned on this card. When he went to McGuigan, this is when we've seen the improvements, because I didn't really see Fowler doing much past British level when he was under Dave Coldwell. He was way too easy to hit. His footwork looked all over the place. He was really relying on brute force. That's it. But with McGuigan, he looks a lot more polished. He's going in there against Liam Smith in his next fight. Whoa, Liam Smith still has a lot left. He does. I thought he was very hard done by over in Russia in his last fight. Very hard done by. This is going to be a tricky fight for Anthony Fowler. I wonder, have they jumped the gun too soon with this? I wonder if they have. I think it's going to be a good fight, big fight for Liverpool, but I just wonder, have they jumped the gun a bit too quick with Anthony Fowler taking this fight? At the end of the day, we'll soon find out. Come what, October, be interesting. We'll see how it goes. Campbell Hatton, he did look improved. I do really truly think that if Campbell Hatton, right, is on these big cards with very little experience, hardly any amateur career, I think that for him, the best course of action, in my opinion, would be for Eddie Hearn to go to one of these smaller promoters, like that guy who puts those shows on in Sheffield, and just say, look, put him out onto some of these cards. Small hall shows when they're coming back. Get him. He needs to learn his craft, but with not having so much pressure of being on these big shows, because I think that that's going to add unnecessary pressure to Hatton that he doesn't need. You know, he's not got the experience of travelling abroad as an amateur. He's not got any real experience at any level. They need to be very careful how they match him with these journeymen, because it takes one journeyman with a bit of survival skills who could maybe throw a couple of shots, maybe outwork Campbell Hatton. He's fighting 4-rounders. 4-rounders, if you start slow in a 4-rounder and you lose 2 rounds, you're fighting for a draw. You really are. So they want to be very careful how they match him. As I said, personally, I would put him on some small hall shows. I would do a deal with a promoter. Look, I will pay you X amount of money to put him on them shows. Just, I'll pay his purse, get him out, get him away from the cameras so he can learn his craft. I think he needs that for about 5 or 6 fights, maybe more. You know, that's what Campbell Hatton, I think, needs. There's talk of Eddie Hearn bringing back the next gen shows, which again, they were very good for getting the up and comers out. And I think Campbell Hatton would need some of that as well. If he was doing it in York Hall, I think that's where he mainly used to do them. Again, nice little venue, not too much pressure on them. Get him out on there. Alright. Now we've got Chris Billum Smith versus Tommy McCarthy. Very close competitive fight. Me personally, I felt Billum Smith nicked it. You know, I thought McCarthy, I don't think he went full tilt in there. I think that he fought within himself a little bit, and I think Billum Smith done, in my opinion, enough to nick that fight. It was a good competitive fight, don't get me wrong. If you had McCarthy winning, I could make a case for it, yeah, I suppose, but Billum Smith, to me, rightful winner. Rightful winner was Chris Billum Smith. If they do a rematch, I'll be up for it. I think that both guys can improve, and I think that Billum Smith, although we lost that very close decision to Riakporhe, and you could say Riakporhe, he did do a better job on Tommy McCarthy, but Billum Smith, for me, since then, he's gone on further. I mean, what's Riakporhe? Riakporhe hasn't done it. Has he even fought since 2019? I don't think he has. Actually. So Billum Smith doing his thing. If they do a rematch, hey, that's all good. You know, I got no issue with that. Main event. Zoo Can, because on BoxRec he's Can Zoo, and I've been calling him that for a while, but everyone I see on interviews and everyone I see on the zone was calling him Zoo Can. So for this video we'll call him Zoo Can. Okay? We'll just leave it with that. He fought Lee Wood. Now, this was for the WBA regular featherweight title, so a lot of people don't count Lee Wood as champion. Me personally, I don't count the regular title. That's me personally. I don't count it as a legit world title. However, if you look at featherweight, Leo Santa Cruz is still the super champion. When's the last time? He hasn't fought a featherweight in years. He's not defended that title in years. He's fought at 130 and at 130. They need to get rid. No. As far as I'm concerned, you could actually make a case that Lee Wood is the legit champion at 126, because at the end of the day, the main champion, he's not defended that title in 2 years. I mean, the WBA stripped Manny Pacquiao, made him champion in recess. All right, after what, a year and a bit of inactivity, 2 years. I know Leo Santa Cruz theoretically he's not been inactive for that long. You know, he only fought back in October, but nevertheless, he's not fought at that weight division. So if they made him champion in recess, I got no problem with them upgrading Lee Wood the full champion. I think they should. So make it that what you will. In terms of the fight, Lee Wood, very well done. You know, he done a very, very good job on Kanzu. I saw the stoppage. There was only about 15 seconds left to go in that 12th round. It's really a hit and a miss if you felt it was premature. I felt maybe the referee could have let it go on a little bit longer, although saying that Kanzu didn't really, protest, to be fair, but only 15 seconds to go in the 12th round. It's really a hit and a miss now, to be honest with you. But great performance by Lee Wood. A fighter who's done it the hard way. He was trained by Dave Colwell. He's fighting at British level. He lost to Jazza Dickinson in the Golden Contract over 10. It was Jazza Dickinson I think he lost to. And now he's trained under Ben Davison. We give Ben Davison a lot of people have given Ben Davison a lot of critique. I think that the biggest issue I have with Ben Davison is that he's too, fond of the camera. But other than that, in terms of his boxing brain and what he's got these fighters to do, he's a very good trainer. People say, well, he's got Billy Joe Saunders, he was the finished article. He's got Tyson Fury, he was the finished article. Lee Wood, British level fighter. Though you could argue he's now world champion. So I look at that and I say, do you know what? Fair play. You can't argue with Lee Wood. Lee Wood wasn't a world level fighter prior to Ben Davison taking him. Some people may say, well, he's still not. Okay, fair enough, that's your opinion. But at the end of the day, he's got him to a world title. Whether you agree with it or not, he should be elevated to full champion, in my opinion. He should be. So that was the DAZN card. In America, Michael Coffey lost to Jonathan Rice. Oh my good lord. What were they thinking? I mean, that matchmaking was shocking. When I heard that news, right, because Gerald Washington was the original opponent. Washington, we know what we're going to get with him. We do. He's not got much fire there. He's a bit of athleticism, but he's just not got much to him. And I remember thinking when he pulled out, I was like, all right, who are they going to get? Then they said Jonathan Coffey, and I was like, whoa, hold on a minute, right? It's very rare, when your original opponent pulls out on a short notice. You get someone who was arguably a much better fighter, and that's what they did with Jonathan Rice. That was a really, really poor idea to put him in there, because Jonathan Rice, although he's lost a good few fights, he is still a very tricky fighter. He's a very tricky fighter, and Michael Coffey in some aspects, and Michael Coffey's shown himself to be a decent fighter. Like the Marnie Rock, when he fought him at the start of this year, he looked good. He looked pretty much like a fish out of water in this fight. He really did. Jonathan Rice went in there, did the job, and he moves onwards and upwards. He will need to see what he does from here, because at the end of the day, he's taken a few losses. Don't let the losses define the fighter. There are certain fighters who are better than their record suggests. They might have a few losses earlier on in their careers. You look at someone like Tevin Farmer. Tevin Farmer's not the most entertaining fighter in the world, it has to be said, but I think out of his first few fights, he had more losses than he had wins. He was able to get some wins together, to get a bit of confidence under his belt. He was able to win a world title. So you can't always judge a fighter just based upon them not having a stellar record, at a certain point in their career. If they're able to improve, if they're not taking serious shellackings, they can find a way to progress. They can. They absolutely can. Other news, Sergey Kovalev has put his name into the hat for a potential rematch with Canelo Alvarez. He is after that money, isn't he? Has he fought since he got knocked out by Canelo? I don't think he has. So Sergey Kovalev, at the end of the day, I think Kovalev needs to call it a day in boxing. I just don't see him doing much of anything anymore in the division. Like light heavyweight, I don't think he's able to really make that weight comfortably. He's not big enough for cruiserweight. He wants to fight Canelo again. He wants that Canelo payday. To be fair, he done decent enough against Canelo, to be fair, before he got knocked out. And that was a legit knockout. I still have people saying that wasn't legit. Like, what? That was, like... If Sergey Kovalev could fake that knockout, right, then that's some Heath Ledger style acting in there. Because ain't no way you're faking that. And if you are, you deserve an Oscar. Seriously. But Kovalev, he's in the bit of the wilderness now after that Melikuziev fight fell through. I mean, God knows what he's going to do next. He's been out of the ring since November 2019, coming up on 2 years. We'll need to wait and see. Richard Commey versus Lomachenko being talked about now as a possible fight. That's interesting. That's a good fight. You know, Richard Commey is a very good fighter. I'm nearly sure when Richard Commey won his world title 2 years ago that they were trying to get a Lomachenko fight over the line ASAP. And I think Lomachenko got injured. Don't you correct me if I'm wrong with that, but I think Lomachenko ended up getting injured or something, or words to that effect. And Commey ended up fighting Beltran as a mandatory or voluntary, and then he ended up losing to... No, I think it was a voluntary, and then he ended up losing to Teofimo. But Commey's still a good fighter. Make no mistake about that. So him against Lomachenko, be interesting. Be very much interesting. Commey is a very big puncher. You know, he is still a very, very good fighter. Lomachenko still has plenty left in the bag. You know, he really does. Still has plenty left in the tank. I said back. Plenty left in the tank. And I think Lomachenko versus Commey, it's a good fight though. Make no mistake, it's a very good fight. So I'd be interested to see that fight. Lomachenko versus Richard Commey. I'd love to see Teofimo in there against, you know, if he wants to get Cambosa Jr. out of the way, so be it. But I'd like to see him in there against Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, someone like that, you know, because although I don't begrudge him, I'd like to see the Lomachenko rematch at some stage. But you know, if Lomo's going one way, Teofimo goes the other. Hey, as long as we get good fights. In other news, they just broke today. Daniel Dubois' next opponent's been announced. The guy in the States, Joe, I think is it Casamore or something like that is how you pronounce his name. I think his record was like 19-3, but he's never been stopped. You know, the losses he's had haven't been against great guys. I mean, one of the losses was, two of them I haven't heard of. One of them was a guy called Daniel Martz, I think. He's been knocked out a few times. You know, he's like a journeyman, and he was beating this guy on points. So he's never been in there, from what I can see, with someone the level of a Dubois puncher. So he's fighting on that card. That's on the KSI card, isn't it? Is it KSI or is it Logan Paul? Like, look, I don't keep track with these YouTube boxers and stuff like that. I know Tommy Fury's going to be on it, and we know what that's. But they're going to try and get, like, is it Logan or Jake? I think it's Jake Paul, or is it Logan Paul? Like, as you can clearly tell, I don't pay much attention to these YouTubers. You know, I'm not talking about boxing. I mean, just in general. I wouldn't be able to tell them. You know, if you told me, you know, that lady over there was Jake Paul, I'd be like, all right, fair enough. Because I really just couldn't pay them any more attention. I don't follow that kind of stuff. I just know they've been doing the YouTube boxing thing. I haven't really watched any of their fights, to be honest with you. But I know they were talking, him and Tommy Fury were going back and forth. So they'll probably put Tommy Fury on that card, you know, to get that. That's sell. You know, Tommy was on Love Island, gave him a big following. This guy, Jake Paul, Logan Paul, one of the Pauls, I'm probably pissing people off who do know them, and they're like, gee, for God's sake, it's this one's this one's that. Yeah, well, I don't know, either or. Alright, one of the Paul brothers, we'll just call him that, you know, because I'm sure people are getting pissed off now, being like, oh, you don't know which one's which, what the hell. One of the Paul brothers, that they'll try and do him and Tommy Fury next, wait and you see, and make a bit of money from that. So ayo with that. Other than that, I think that's really kind of it. Like, I mean, like, I really wasn't paying much attention to the boxing over the weekend. You know, I was away. I went on Friday. It took me 5 hours to get to Cork. It should only take about 2.5, but it took us 5 hours to get to Cork. And yeah, it was fun. You know, I had a good time. I enjoyed myself. And yeah, that's really kind of it, really. I'm just tired today, which is one of the reasons why I didn't get this up earlier. You know, it's only going up now because it's really kind of hitting me today, the weekend. So I'm only really doing one video today. I'm not getting any ready for tomorrow. I will probably get one out tomorrow at some stage. Just not going to record it tonight. I'm literally going to go sleep after this, basically, because I'm tired. But other than that, that's really it. Probably not the most entertaining review of the week, but to be fair, I didn't cover any of the fights. I will be covering them this weekend, so I had to kind of chuck 3 post-fight reviews into one. Hope I did a good job of that. I'll obviously do a preview because I've done one of this last fight camp, so I'm going to do one of this fight camp coming. I'll do a preview with that in the next day or two, and yeah, we'll have a talk about that then. This one on paper was set to be the best, and I don't know if it will. Obviously, I don't know if it will be. There's still 2 more to go, but we'll need to wait and see. In terms of this coming week's fight camp, it's interesting. I'll talk about that probably tomorrow or the next day in a preview video, and we'll do some of the fights on the weekend. For now, lads and lasses, I hope you enjoyed. I'll leave it there. If you could, smash the like button, subscribe, hit the notifications bell if you could. It would help your boy out something terrible. For now, I'll talk to you. Peace.